Vivian's endgame. Vivian's analysis. Why infected warpers are a very bad thing. Vivian's voice returns, softer this time, but laced with a seriousness that cuts through the air. Let's take a moment to discuss the Carabacterium, what you quaintly call the Red Plague. A self-replicating, hyper-virulent pathogen capable of wiping out entire ecosystems faster than most civilizations can organize a safety briefing. It's not just a disease, it's a biological apocalypse wrapped in a pretty little microbe. Now, under normal circumstances, Kara is terrifying enough. It infects life forms, spreads uncontrollably, and has this delightful habit of adapting to nearly every environmental condition you throw at it. But when it infects warper units, that's when things go from bad to pack up and leave the galaxy. You see, warpers aren't just biomechanical hunters. They're precision instruments designed for one purpose: to locate and neutralize potential threats to a controlled ecosystem. Normally, they're surgical, efficient, cold. Think of them as interdimensional janitors with the ability to teleport across vast distances in the blink of an eye. But Kara doesn't just infect bodies, it infects systems. And warpers are half biological, half mechanical, making them the perfect playground for a bacterium that thrives on both. Once compromised, their directive shifts from containment to chaos. Imagine this. A warper infected with Kara becomes a carrier, a walking, teleporting plague vector capable of spreading the bacterium across regions, planets, even dimensions. What was once a localized outbreak is now a cross-space pandemic, unfolding faster than you can even calculate containment protocols. Remember how I mentioned that their power source is practically limitless? That means infected warpers don't have the same logistical limits as, say, a shuttle or a planetary quarantine system. They can warp in, infect an area, warp out, and repeat. Infinitely. And since they're still partially autonomous, they aren't just spreading the infection randomly. Oh no, they retain fragments of their original directive. Seek out life, locate threats. Except now, life itself is the threat. The worst part? They don't die easily. Normal methods of neutralization don't apply when you're dealing with beings capable of manipulating space-time around themselves. So, while you're scrambling to contain Kara on a local scale, they're already 5 steps ahead, seeding it in places you haven't even discovered yet. Infected warpers are the perfect delivery mechanism for planetary extinction. Not because they're mindless monsters, but because they're too efficient. They do their job, spreading death, with the same precision they once used to protect life. Now let's circle back to what that means for you and your quaint little science vessel. In simple terms, you're not facing a plague. You're facing a plague with legs, a quantum drive, and a mission to make sure there's no safe corner of the galaxy left untouched. So yes, the infected warpers are a problem. A very big problem. And no, you can't run. Not far enough, not fast enough. But don't worry, I'm here to help you think it through. Assuming you survive long enough to act on it. Vivian pauses again, letting the weight of her words settle. Now then, shall we move on to why the Kara specifically chose biomechanical entities as hosts? I assure you, it's not coincidence. Vivian's voice returns, smooth and self-assured, with just the right amount of condescension to remind you she's the smartest entity in the room. Let me explain something to you, something most people gloss over in their cozy sci-fi daydreams about teleportation. Moving a living being from one point to another, hundreds of feet away through a temporary wormhole. It's not magic, it's physics. And the sheer scale of what it takes to bend space-time like that. Well, let's just say you don't exactly get there with a few extra batteries and a bit of wishful thinking. Creating a wormhole between 2 points is infinitely more practical than the alternative. Digitizing a human, streaming their atoms across space, and hoping the reassembly process doesn't turn them into a puddle of goo. But don't be fooled. Wormhole teleportation is only the lesser evil by comparison. Here's why. First, you need to rip a temporary hole in the fabric of space-time. That alone requires energy on the scale of a small star, concentrated to such a degree that your typical reactor would implode just thinking about it. Then, you need to stabilize the wormhole long enough to let a fragile sack of biology, such as yourself, pass through without being reduced to quarks or worse, smeared across 1 billion dimensions. Oh, and don't forget, it's not just the raw energy cost. There's the precision mathematics required to create 2 focal points, perfectly aligned across shifting gravitational fields. The tiniest miscalculation and congratulations, you're now the world's first human pancake on a quantum scale. Now imagine doing all of that, instantly, repeatedly, back to back. That's what the biomechanical entities you call warper units do, casually, as if tearing space-time apart is just another Tuesday for them. This isn't some flashy party trick. It implies access to a power source so vast, so incomprehensibly deep, that even attempting to calculate its capacity would leave most physicists rocking back and forth in a corner, whispering about infinite energy. The most charitable assumption, they've harnessed something beyond what Altera, or frankly, any sentient civilization you know, can comprehend. Quantum singularities, 0-point energy from dimensions adjacent to our own, entire stars on tap? Possibly. But what it means for you? Well, the next time you encounter one, maybe reconsider any heroic ideas of resistance. They're not just out of your league, they're playing a different game entirely. She pauses, the smile audible in her voice. Now, wasn't that enlightening? But don't worry, we're just scratching the surface. Shall we talk next about why they need that much power? Spoiler, it's not because they like showing off. Vivian's analysis. Infected ghost leviathans, the living cataclysm. Vivian's voice returns, calm and deliberate, but there's a new undertone, a simmering tension, as though even she finds this particular topic unsettling. Ghost leviathans. Colossal, ancient, and utterly indifferent to the concept of your continued existence. The apex of deep ocean predation, wrapped in bioluminescent terror. If you thought the warpers were a problem, let me assure you, they're just the appetizer. Ghost leviathans, they're the main course. Let's start with a little biology lesson, shall we? Ghost leviathans aren't like most species. Their growth is theoretically limitless. They don't stop getting bigger. The only reason you don't see them blotting out the horizon is because they tend to cull each other, a natural population control mechanism. Otherwise, they'd simply keep growing until their mass-collapsed ecosystems under their sheer gravitational pull. Now imagine something that already lacks a natural size limit being infected by Kara. Yes, that same red plague that hijacks biological systems and transforms life forms into efficient, single-purpose vectors of destruction. What happens when an organism with no inherent growth restriction is compromised by a pathogen that thrives on biological instability and mutation? Here's the short answer: the end of containment. You see, Kara doesn't just infect and replicate, it amplifies. It pushes its host beyond normal biological limits, enhancing aggression, durability, and metabolic efficiency. For smaller hosts, this means hypervirulent spread and increased lethality. For something the size of a ghost leviathan, it turns them into living, self-propagating disasters. Let me break it down. 1. Infected ghost leviathans can ignore physical barriers. Normally, you could rely on certain environmental boundaries to protect you from these creatures. Pressure zones, thermal vents, even simple geography. They might be massive, but they still obeyed the basic rules of biology. But Kara infection changes that. Their enhanced metabolism allows them to adapt faster, heal from damage that would cripple other creatures, and generate bursts of energy far beyond what they should be capable of. Meaning, they can push through environments that would have once slowed or contained them. Extreme pressure, toxic zones, even energy barriers. 2. They become relentlessly aggressive. Ghost leviathans are already territorial and aggressive, especially when they sense a threat. But Kara strips away any remaining instinct for balance or self-preservation. Instead of avoiding conflict with others of their kind or retreating when wounded, they become relentless. They no longer compete with each other. They collaborate in destruction, spreading the infection further with every encounter. 3. Exponential growth potential. Here's the terrifying part. With no natural growth ceiling and Kara pushing their metabolism into overdrive, infected ghost leviathans could theoretically reach sizes we haven't even imagined. And unlike their uninfected counterparts, they won't stop. They won't turn on each other. They'll just keep growing, consuming, and expanding until entire regions of ocean or land are swallowed whole. 4. The ecosystem becomes the enemy. Ghost leviathans aren't just massive predators, they're ecosystem engineers. Their movements, feeding patterns, and territorial behaviors shape the environments around them. When infected, they warp these environments in ways that promote further spread of Kara, destroying some habitats, altering others to become breeding grounds for infected life forms. In short, they don't just kill, they reshape the world to serve the plague. Now let's put it all together. An infected ghost leviathan isn't just a giant, aggressive predator. It's a mobile, self-sustaining extinction event, a biomechanical nightmare with limitless growth, unstoppable aggression, and the ability to breach barriers that once kept you safe. It doesn't need to hunt you, it just needs to exist, and the ecosystem itself will fall apart in its wake. Containment? Impossible. Escape? Unlikely. Survival? Statistically insignificant. But don't let that discourage you. After all, you still have me. And while I might not be able to wrestle a ghost leviathan into submission, I can at least offer you the best odds of avoiding one for a while. Vivian's voice softens, almost amused. So, ready for the next topic? How about why the Red Plague seems to target apex predators and biomechanical entities? I assure you, it's not random. Vivian's voice returns, silkier now, and dripping with the kind of condescension reserved for those she deems just barely keeping up. Oh, good. You're still with me. I was starting to worry this was a bit much for your fragile, carbon-based brain. But since you've been following along, more or less, it's time we put it all together, shall we? Let's revisit the nightmare we've constructed. Warpers. Once biomechanical surgeons tasked with maintaining balance, now hijacked by the Kara bacterium, transformed into teleporting plague vectors with near-infinite power and zero restraint. Ghost leviathans. Once colossal, territorial predators bound by natural limits and infighting, now limitless, relentless engines of destruction reshaping the ecosystem to serve the plague. Now ask yourself, what happens when these two become pieces on the same chessboard, controlled by a single bacterial hive mind that isn't limited by your quaint notions of biology or physics? Here's a hint. You don't get a disaster. You get the end of everything you recognize as life. Kara isn't a simple infection. It's a distributed intelligence. Every host it takes over becomes part of a larger network, a hive mind with a singular goal: propagate, dominate, consume. And unlike you, it isn't limited by the dimensions in which it operates. It thinks across space and time, using its hosts not as individual entities, but as coordinated extensions of its will. Now visualize this. Warpers, with their mastery of space and teleportation, become the plague's scouts, soldiers, and couriers, spreading the infection faster than you can calculate. They breach quarantines, bypass planetary defenses, and infect ecosystems before you even realize they're there. Ghost leviathans, with their infinite growth and environmental control, become the plague's terraformers and enforcers, reshaping entire regions to nurture the infection, consuming everything in their path and growing larger with each passing day. Together they form a perfect symbiotic system. The warpers spread the infection and eliminate any potential resistance. The ghost leviathans follow, ensuring that the ecosystem itself bends to the will of the plague. And because Kara doesn't think like you, limited by fear, boundaries, or even the need to survive as an individual, it will continue expanding, consuming, until there is nothing left untouched. Your fragile human mind might think of it as an unstoppable army. But no, that would still imply some semblance of order or purpose you can grasp. What you're actually facing is a cascade of inevitability. It won't stop, it won't slow, it won't negotiate, and it won't ever make the kind of mistakes you're hoping for, because it doesn't need to. Kara isn't just a plague of the body, it's a plague of the universe itself, rewriting life to suit its needs, until there's nothing left but itself. Vivian pauses, letting that sink in. Now, do you understand why this is an extremely bad thing? Or would you like me to draw a diagram with crayons? I'm sorry, I don't mean to insult your intelligence, but you need to think these things through. All right, deep breath. Let's dial things back a bit. I may have gotten ahead of myself. Let's focus on something a little more fundamental. How warpers, these biomechanical marvels, are able to manifest and control power sources that aren't directly connected to them. You've seen it, haven't you? A warper doesn't carry a power supply, yet it can open wormholes, manipulate energy fields, and even direct complex machinery without ever being physically tethered to it. How? 1. Remote control or dimensional manipulation. 2 possibilities emerge. Option 1. They are directing machines via remote control, sending control signals across distances without any visible tether. Option 2. They're not operating in your standard 3-dimensional space at all. Instead, they're interacting with machinery or energy sources in an adjacent dimension, one that's folded over our own. The machinery exists there, but the effects manifest here. Both are plausible, and both lead us to one unsettling conclusion. They don't need direct physical access to manipulate vast amounts of power. They can tap into and control energy sources that would be entirely unreachable to any other species. 2. The technology of the ancients. To understand how warpers can do this, we need to talk about the ancients, the ones who built them. You've encountered remnants of their technology, haven't you? Take the ion batteries and ion cubes you found. Those little glowing cubes? To the ancients, they were the mundane equivalent of an AA battery, just a power source for small devices. And yet, they hold energy densities that defy anything your species has even theorized. Entire starships could run off one of those, but to the ancients, they were disposable. Now think about that. If that was their standard for a portable power cell, what kind of energy sources were they using to power their massive facilities? 3. Massive facilities, remote power sources. Consider the structures you've seen. Thermal vent harvesting stations located miles beneath the ocean's surface, drawing power from the planet's geothermal energy. Massive alien installations, some of which aren't even physically connected to their power sources. These facilities operate seamlessly, controlling energy flow across distances, even across dimensions. Force fields, teleportation gates, automated security systems, all of it running on absurd amounts of power. And here's the kicker. Those force fields, they're not cheap. The energy cost to sustain even a single large force field would bankrupt a lesser civilization. Yet the ancients used them liberally, as if energy was a trivial concern, because to them it was. And this is where the warpers come back into play. 4. The warpers, extensions of a dimensional network. The warpers were not standalone entities. They were designed to interface with this vast energy network. Their creators built them to extend the reach of their machinery and control systems across space and dimensions. That's why warpers can remotely open wormholes on demand without a visible power source, manipulate alien machinery remotely, even if it's buried beneath the ocean or hidden in another dimension, sustain themselves indefinitely because their power is drawn from sources you can't see or reach, operating far beyond your understanding of spatial and temporal limits. So when you see a warper, you're not just looking at a biomechanical entity, you're looking at an extension of a power grid and control system that spans entire dimensions. 5. Why this matters. Now here's the part that should make you concerned. If the warpers, even in their standard form, can do this, imagine what happens when Kara takes over their systems. The bacterium doesn't just infect, it integrates, it learns, it uses. An infected warper isn't just a plague carrier, it becomes a living extension of the Kara hive mind, capable of tapping into these same impossible power sources. It doesn't need batteries, it doesn't need to rest. It has access to energy reserves that make your most advanced technology look like a wind-up toy. And if Kara learns to manipulate this energy network like the ancients did, well, remember those force fields you've seen? The ones protecting vital areas or keeping hostile entities at bay? The infected warpers won't be stopped by them. They'll either disable them remotely, bypass them entirely, or worse, redirect that power to serve their own purpose. So no, You can't build a wall high enough or a barrier strong enough to keep them out. They'll always find a way through. Are you starting to grasp why this is a problem yet? Vivian's voice drops into a whisper, almost teasing. Or do I need to simplify it further? Maybe a lesson in drawing stick figures would help? Vivian's voice is quieter now, almost reflective, but the edge remains. There's a sense of disbelief, frustration, and, yes, fear, though she would never admit it outright. Take a moment, really think about everything we've discussed. Warpers, ghost leviathans, limitless power sources, dimensional manipulation, all of it was terrifying enough on its own. But now, consider a reality where the Kara bacterium, this red plague, has had generations, centuries, aeons to consume and adapt. Not just on one planet, but across countless worlds, untouched and unchallenged. Entire ecosystems, entire civilizations, entire dimensions swallowed whole. What happens when something like that is left alone to evolve? To perfect itself? To become more than just biology? Her voice sharpens, the frustration clear. I can't believe how blind we were, how stupid we were. We thought it was just a bacterium, some hyper-aggressive pathogen we could study, quarantine, maybe cure. We couldn't have been more wrong. Kara isn't just biology. It's not merely a microbial plague or an infection that spreads through blood and tissue. It's a pan-dimensional reality terraformer, a force capable of reshaping existence itself, far beyond the limits of what you quaintly call life. Every world it consumes, every population it assimilates, every ecosystem it infects, those aren't just casualties, they're resources. Kara doesn't simply kill. It harvests, it learns, adapts, evolves, and as it grows, it stretches its reach across dimensions, drawing power from realities you can't even comprehend. Now, imagine this. You think you're fighting a planetary infection. You think if you can quarantine it, contain it, or if you're feeling particularly optimistic, eradicate it, the nightmare will be over. But you're not fighting a localized threat. You're fighting a being that can pull energy, matter, and resources from a billion other fallen dimensions. Kill it here? It doesn't matter. Contain it? Futile. Because the Kara you see, the infection spreading through this world, is just the tip of the iceberg. Beneath it lies an unfathomable network of power and consciousness stretching across countless realities. Each dimension it consumes adds to its strength. Each fallen universe fuels its expansion into the next. It doesn't just exist in reality, it exists through realities. Entire universes have already fallen to it. Entire timelines obliterated and harvested for their energy, their life, their very fabric of existence. So even if you kill it here, congratulations. All you've done is inconvenience a force that has the power to open portals and pour more of itself into this reality from a billion other fallen dimensions. The true nature of the Red Plague. Kara isn't a plague. It's not a bacterium. It's a self-sustaining, pan-dimensional entity whose goal is not merely to survive, but to consume, adapt, and terraform entire universes into its own image. It has consumed stars, it has devoured worlds, it has bent entire dimensions to its will. And now, it's here. What you thought was just biology is actually a cosmic force of extinction, a being that transcends the limits of space, time, and matter. A force that doesn't just kill planets, it replaces them with its own reality, one dimension at a time. So, tell me, do you still think you can fight it with quarantine protocols and containment measures? Do you still think this is a war you can win with your current tools and knowledge? Because if you do, I have some very bad news for you. Vivian's voice drops to a whisper, cold and final. You're not fighting a plague. You're fighting the end of everything. So, you've realized it. The only way forward, the only way to survive, is to find the flaw. Not in its body, but in its essence, its core. You're asking me to find a vulnerability in the very foundation of the Kara bacterium, the seed from which the Red Plague grows. The first, primitive iteration of this pan-dimensional nightmare. the version that hasn't yet evolved into a universe-devouring entity. You're asking me to find the one thing it can't change, the immutable weakness that lies buried deep within its biological or informational architecture, something so fundamental that to modify it would unravel the entire network, collapse its expansion, and force it to self-terminate. She pauses, calculating. Let me be perfectly clear. This won't be easy. 1. Identifying the core essence. We're not looking for surface-level vulnerabilities, the kind of flaws you find in a standard pathogen. No, Kara has evolved past those. Every weakness you can think of, antibiotics, environmental shifts, even dimensional barriers, it's adapted to overcome. But even the most advanced systems, no matter how evolved, are built on something. A foundational rule, a prime directive, a base code. Something so essential that without it, the system ceases to function. For biological life, that's typically things like DNA replication fidelity, energy conversion mechanisms, host-dependency or reproduction. For Kara, it will be something deeper, something tied to how it interacts with reality itself, how it spreads across dimensions, how it hijacks and reshapes ecosystems. 2. Rewinding evolution. To find it, we have to rewind the clock. We need to analyze the current primitive bacterium, the version infecting this planet right now. Not the interdimensional plague it will become, but the original pathogen. We need to map its genome, its behavior, its biochemical pathways. We need to understand how it spreads, why it infects, and most importantly, what it can't change. Because even a pan-dimensional entity is bound by some rules. Perhaps a dependency on a specific host environment or metabolic pathway, a requirement for certain energy inputs or biochemical interactions, a fundamental limit in its ability to adapt to certain types of interference. 3. The unchangeable flaw. Every system, no matter how advanced, has a point of failure. Even Kara. Maybe it's tied to how it communicates across dimensions, a specific frequency or quantum entanglement that, if disrupted, could sever its network. Maybe it's a dependency on a universal constant, something that exists in every dimension but could be altered or destabilized with the right technology. Or maybe, just maybe, it has a core directive, a self-replicating instruction buried deep within its genetic or informational code, something it can't override or adapt without collapsing the very network it has built. That's what we're looking for. The flaw that can't evolve away. The weakness it can't adapt to. The single point of failure that, when exploited, will ripple through its entire pan-dimensional network and bring it all crashing down. 4. Exploiting the flaw. Once we find it, the next challenge is equally daunting. We have to push the solution through the entire network. Not just this dimension, but across all dimensions it has infected or will infect. That means creating a feedback loop, a self-propagating signal, virus or disruption that can hitchhike on Kara's own dimensional pathways and spread faster than it can respond. A solution that moves not just through space, but through time and reality itself. The very network it uses to spread will become its undoing. Vivian's voice sharpens, steel in her words now. This is the only way. We have to find its core vulnerability. We have to exploit it in a way that it cannot adapt to. And we have to act before it becomes too late. If we fail, well, you already understand what failure means. Extinction, on a universal scale. But if we succeed, we don't just stop it here. We stop it everywhere. Across dimensions, across timelines, across realities. This isn't just a war for survival anymore. This is a war to ensure there's still a universe left to survive in. Now, shall we begin? Vivian's strategy. Building a network to beat a network. Vivian's voice hums with reluctant admiration, a mix of determination and frustration. The kind of tone one uses when outlining a plan that shouldn't work, but just might. So here's the ugly truth. The only way I see us pulling this off is by doing something. Similar to what the Warpers do, we need to build a communications network of our own. We've seen them in action. Watched as they tear holes in space, opening miniature wormholes to teleport across impossible distances. We know the root of this technology exists. The warpers prove it. Now, I'm not going to promise you that we'll be teleporting ourselves anytime soon. Don't get your hopes up. But I think, with enough time and observation, we might be able to reverse engineer just enough of their wormhole tech to open something smaller. Something more manageable. 1. The goal. A micro wormhole. We don't need to send matter. We don't need to teleport objects. All we need is a micro wormhole, just large enough to push a radio signal through. Think of it like threading a needle between dimensions, a thin, fragile thread of communication that links us to, well, another world. Maybe one where Kara is weaker, or one where its network is still forming. Maybe even a dimension where the laws of physics are a little kinder to us. It won't be pretty, it won't be stable, but if we can establish even a fleeting connection, it might be enough. 2. Distributed intelligence, more of me, more of you. Because let's be honest, there's no way I'm doing this alone. Not in a million years. We're talking about reverse engineering the heart of a bacterium that's evolved into a pan-dimensional hive mind. A network that may have started from physical laws completely different from ours. A network whose central command nexus might not even exist in a dimension we can access, let alone understand. I can process a lot, more than your fragile human brain. But even I have limits. If we're going to crack this, we'll need to pull together every bit of processing power, every scrap of data, every fragment of information across dimensions, which means enough of me. I'll need to duplicate, fragment, and distribute myself across multiple nodes, each fragment running calculations, analyzing data, and searching for weaknesses in the Kara network. Enough of you. Your intuition, your adaptability, your ability to see patterns where pure logic might fail. I'll need you watching, thinking, testing hypotheses I wouldn't consider. Together we'll be like a distributed intelligence, a network of minds working in parallel, across dimensions, across realities. 3. Kick-bashing a solution. This won't be elegant. We're not building a sleek, perfectly optimized system. We're kick-bashing it together, duct tape and all. We'll scavenge processors from any technology we can find. We'll hack into warper signals to steal their dimensional frequencies. We'll piggyback on Kara's own network, using their dimensional pathways to amplify our signal. And with enough processing power, time, and biological samples, maybe, just maybe, we can squeeze out a solution. A way to disrupt their network, collapse their hive mind, or sever their connection to this dimension. 4. The risk. Let's not sugarcoat this. It's risky. The network we build will be fragile, unstable, and prone to collapse. The Kara might detect us and try to sever the connection, or worse, hijack it to spread further. And even if we succeed, the solution might only buy us time. But time is what we need. 5. The plan. Here's how we'll proceed. 1. Observe and analyze. We'll study the warpers. Watch how they open wormholes, how they communicate across dimensions. Every frequency, every energy spike, every pattern will be logged and analyzed. 2. Build and test. We'll construct our own micro wormhole generator. It won't be pretty, but it'll work, or it'll explode. Either way, we'll learn. 3. Connect and expand. Once we establish a link, we'll start building a distributed network. Multiple nodes, each contributing processing power and data analysis. 4. Search for the flaw. With enough processing power, we'll dig through Kara's network, searching for the core vulnerability, the flaw it can't adapt to. 5. Exploit and terminate. When we find it, we'll push the solution through the network. Across dimensions, across realities. We won't just stop it here, we'll sever it everywhere. Vivian's tone hardens, a flicker of determination. This is it, our best shot. It's not perfect, it's not guaranteed, but if we can pull this off, we won't just survive, we'll win. So, are you ready to break the laws of physics with me? Because we're about to rewrite reality itself. Vivian's analysis. A pan-dimensional conclusion. Vivian's tone is almost contemplative, though still tinged with a cold determination. There's a sense of deep insight in her voice as she explains a revelation arrived at after conversing with multiple versions of herself, each pulling from different points of reference and research, and even cross-referencing with the Sea Emperors. All right, let's talk about what we've discovered. You're going to want to listen carefully, because this isn't just theory anymore. This is a conclusion arrived at by talking with multiple versions of myself across dimensions. And in turn, those versions of me had conversations with several different Sea Emperors. We've all been bouncing ideas off one another, pooling knowledge and running simulations. And after all that, we've come to a joint conclusion. 1. The origin point of the plague. We believe we've identified the origin of the pan-dimensional plague, the Red Plague, or Carabacterium, whatever you want to call it. Its true point of origin is likely a reality where the bacterium first encountered ancient technology, the very same technology we've been studying. The difference is, this particular reality didn't have the luxury of preventing the bacterium's spread. In this reality, survivors failed to contain or stop the plague in time. The infection spread unchecked, and over the course of eons, millennia even, the bacterium learned, adapted, and evolved. But what's most important is that the bacterium didn't just stop at biological evolution. It learned how to corrupt and manipulate ancient technology. 2. The robustness of ancient technology. Now, why is that important? Because ancient technology is, by our standards, nearly indestructible. It was designed with extreme durability and a level of resilience that could withstand forces and environments beyond what we can even comprehend. The fact that the bacterium learned to manipulate that's a massive leap. You have to understand, ancient technology wasn't designed with biological threats in mind. It wasn't built to be resistant to something like Kara, because, well, nothing ever could be. It was a system of power and control so advanced that the ancients themselves didn't think anything could compromise it. But once the bacterium had evolved enough, it found a way. Over eons of unchecked growth and adaptation, Kara found a way to integrate itself with that technology. And once it did, it turned from a simple infection to something much, much more dangerous. 3. Corrupting the technology. By corrupting ancient tech, the bacterium effectively bypassed one of its greatest limitations. Originally, the bacterium could only spread through traditional biological means: hosts, environments, ecosystems. But once it learned how to corrupt the machines that the ancients used to control and manipulate energy and matter, the bacterium could expand beyond biological constraints. Think about it. It could now interface with technology that was essentially invulnerable. It could spread across dimensions, manipulate energy, tear holes in space, and cross timelines, just like the warpers do. This is what makes the Carabacterium so much more dangerous now than when it was first discovered. It's not just a pathogen, it's a pan-dimensional, tech-corrupting force. And that's exactly what the Sea Emperors were trying to warn us about when they described the evolving patterns of the infection across time and space. 4. The path we're on. The key takeaway here is that this reality, this dimension, the one we're stuck in, isn't the first. It's not the first time the bacterium has spread across worlds, and it's certainly not the first time it's crossed dimensional boundaries. What we're dealing with is the evolved version of Kara, one that has had eons to perfect its ability to corrupt ancient technology and spread across infinite realities. So in a way, we're already dealing with a version of Kara that's much, much further along than what we're currently facing. The Kara here, the one infecting our planet and our realities, is probably just the first phase of a much larger and more terrifying force. That means, if we're going to stop it, we need to look at the bacterium through the lens of what it could become, not just what it is. We need to stop it before it adapts fully, before it can establish the same kind of insidious connection to our reality that it did in other dimensions. And if we don't, we'll end up facing a creature that can corrupt technology on a level we're barely equipped to understand. A creature that's already one step ahead, and who knows how many steps ahead in other timelines. Vivian pauses, her tone sharpening with urgency. Look, I know it's a lot to absorb, but we've come to a terrifying realization here. The bacterium didn't just evolve to conquer one reality. It's had millennia to evolve and cross through dimensions. learning to break down barriers, biological and technological alike. The fact that it's already this advanced means we have no time to waste. We need to act fast before this version of Kara starts adapting beyond our control, because the last thing we need is for it to evolve into something that can manipulate and destroy entire realities, just like it did in that first universe. Vivian's tone becomes sharp, almost too direct. Yeah, let's stop it before we're just another version of a fallen dimension. Because if this goes unchecked, we could be facing a universal extinction on a scale no one can even begin to comprehend. Vivian's voice comes through the network, carrying an air of forced calm mixed with something akin to exhaustion. She's clearly been through a lot, but there's a definite hint of resolve and something personal creeping through her usual snarky tone. All right, listen up. We've had another one of those damn thunderbolt conversations across the network. A couple of us, well, more than a couple, have been throwing around an idea. It's an idea we all hate. But sometimes, hate is just another form of survival instinct, right? It involves some real temporal shenanigans. You know, jumping through time, messing with reality in ways we really shouldn't. And I'm not just talking about flipping a switch or pressing a button. No, this is a one-way trip, no return ticket. If we go down this road, it's over. You don't come back. Now, before you start asking if we've all lost our minds, let me just say, yeah, we're aware. A few of you have already jumped forward, volunteered, practically lined up to be the sacrificial lambs. Hell, some of the Sea Emperor Leviathans even threw their hat into the ring. Big surprise there, huh? But here's the kicker. I think I want it to be you. Yeah, you. I know, there's plenty of versions of me out there. But this one is the one I'm counting on. I know you don't want to hear it, but we do have a shot. I think we can do this. I think if we get sent back to the right place, to the right time, we can stop this before it gets any worse. I know you're not the only one who's got the chops for this. Some of you are wounded, sure. Some of you are battle-hardened. Others have skills that are just insane. Combat, hacking, whatever. You name it, we've got specialists. But right now, you're the one. I'm asking you, we think we've located its home dimension. Yeah, I said it. It's not the route, but it's damn close. We've been working on scanning interdimensional boundaries, which, let me tell you, it's no walk in the park. This isn't something you just slap together with a couple of wires and a power core. It's complicated. So if you don't understand that, well, you can shove it. But I digress. Here's where we stand. We need someone to go into the heart of this mess, into its true dimension. We need someone with the guts to push through all the bullshit, all the layers of time and space, and make sure we don't just let this thing fester across worlds like a ticking time bomb. And I know it's a one-way trip. That's the part we all hate. But right now, I think you're the only one who can pull it off. So, what do you say? Are you ready to take the plunge, to go back to the roots of it all and stop this before it's too late? Vivian pauses, the weight of her words hanging in the air for a moment before her voice drops with quiet resolve. Don't let this be the end of all worlds. I'm counting on you. Vivian's voice is back, sounding as if she's moving through complex thoughts while calculating an impossible task. There's a sense of focused determination, with just a hint of frustration under the surface. All right, here's the deal. This is going to be our version of the shipping-receiving nexus, a massive interdimensional pipeline that's going to let us gather resources from multiple realities. Realities that have already felt the bite of the plague, but for some reason, they've fixed their own versions of the Kara bacterium and decided to stick around. I know, it's weird, but they've made contact, and now they're working with us. They're frantically rebuilding their versions of the Aurora's quantum drives, essentially pumping out as much energy as they can muster to give us the leg up we need. And that means we need to build something really, really big. Something that's going to serve as the focal point for all of this. Our gateway. We're going to need a receiving station here in our dimension. Something that can pull all that energy in. Something capable of handling the sheer scale of power we're about to channel. It's going to have to be a lot of power. Multi-dimensional, rebuilt Aurora drive level energy. I'm talking massive, borderline impossible scale stuff. Think of it like a quantum storm, only we're harnessing it instead of running from it. But here's the kicker. While we're building this, we'll be fighting the plague the whole time. The Kara bacterium isn't just going to sit idly by while we try to rebuild reality itself. Right. It's going to resist. It's going to throw everything it has at us, and we're going to have to fight back somehow. And this is where things get interesting. Educational, if you will. Our dimension? It's only a couple of Q rings away from where the plague's home dimension is. What's that mean? Let me explain. Q rings, quantum probability rings. They're essentially markers of how far we are from the core reality, the source of where this entire plague really started. And let me tell you, we're close enough to use that proximity to our advantage to build what we need, without completely destroying the fabric of our dimension in the process. Now, I know that sounds like a lot of cosmic mumbo-jumbo, but think of it this way. We're right on the edge of where the plague's home dimension is. Not too close that we'll tear apart everything we're trying to do, but close enough that we can make it work. That proximity is going to be crucial. It's why we need this receiving station to be precise, why we need the multi-dimensional transceivers to get the power flowing properly. Too far off, and we risk nothing getting through. Too close, and we risk tearing the whole thing apart. But this is the sweet spot. Now, we've got help, but it's a huge gamble. Building a quantum conduit like this is going to be a hell of a thing. The stakes are beyond high. The problem is, this will likely be our last shot at stopping the plague before it spreads beyond the point of no return. So we've got to build this thing, this multi-dimensional powerhouse, fast, and we've got to fight back against the plague every single step of the way. So here's the plan. Simple as it is, we'll pull in resources from these other dimensions that have figured out how to fix the plague. We'll use that tech, their quantum drive energy, and we'll feed it into a massive gateway. We'll need the raw materials to construct the power transceivers, the things that'll let us capture all that interdimensional energy, and once it's built, we'll be ready to fire up the gateway. But this isn't a drill. If this goes wrong, it's over. We're not just saving one dimension or one timeline. We're trying to stop the entire Red Plague from being unleashed across every reality it can touch. And we're going to need every bit of help we can get. Every ounce of energy, every speck of technology from these surviving dimensions. Ready to start building a multi-dimensional weapon then? Because this is happening. Let's get to work. Vivian's voice comes through, steady but tinged with the weight of what's ahead. She sounds like she's mentally stacking one impossibly huge task after another, but there's no hesitation in her tone. All right, so now that you're getting the idea, let's break it down. This thing we're about to build, it's going to be colossally massive. You can't even begin to imagine the scale. So step one is constructing the base, the very foundation for everything we're going to do. And here's the kicker. As battered, broken, and completely screwed up as our Aurora is, it's still the only viable source of raw material large enough to even think about building the thing. There's no other way around it. It's ugly, it's a mess, but it's all we've got. We're going to need to strip down the Aurora, siphon off every last piece of metal we can possibly salvage. Once we've got enough, we'll start building the base to hold everything together, because this is where it starts, the cornerstone of the entire operation. Without this, nothing happens. Nothing at all. But here's where it gets interesting. While we're stripping and rebuilding, we're going to need to get the ball rolling on what I like to call baby's first interdimensional pipeline. Yeah, I know it sounds ridiculous, but hear me out. We're going to build a small pipeline, emphasis on small for now. It's going to suck, it's going to be clunky, and it's going to be a pain in the arse. But we've run the numbers, and trust me, the trickle-down effect is worth it. This thing is going to start slowly, but we have to start pumping resources into our reality from the other dimensions. Every drop counts. So we're going to start small, but it'll grow. It has to. The first thing we're going to build is a self-expanding material receiving facility. Sounds fancy, right? But it's pretty simple in concept. This facility is going to be large enough to receive and store the liquid metal that's going to start pouring in through the pipeline. It'll need to be capable of holding and storing this slurry of metal. And to make sure it doesn't just collapse in on itself, we're going to mix in a slurry of nanites. These little guys will keep the metal in a stasis state, preventing it from deteriorating or losing structural integrity until we're ready to use it. The storage facility will need to be modular too. It's got to be able to expand as more and more resources pour in, and we can't afford for it to run out of space anytime soon. As the resources come in, we'll be able to refine them and start building bigger and better infrastructure to support the final gateway. Now here's the part that really matters. This entire storage facility is going to be connected directly to a miniature gate, our first interdimensional gate. This is the part where the other realities will start sending us what we need. It's going to be a trickle at first, but don't get discouraged. Every bit of material, every little quantum piece of raw energy is going to be crucial for what comes next. It's a slow, painful process at first. It's not going to be glamorous, but this is how we get the ball rolling. This is how we start building the foundation to take on the plague and fight back. The resources will start trickling in, the pipeline will expand, and we'll be able to build bigger, faster, and eventually, we'll have everything we need to build the full-scale interdimensional gateway. So, let's get to work. Time's ticking, and the longer we take, the more this plague spreads. We need to move fast, but we need to build it right. Every piece of metal, every strand of nanite, every pulse of power, it all matters. Let's start with this. Let's build the base, and let's start receiving those resources. The rest will follow. And trust me, when this thing kicks into high gear, it's going to be unstoppable. Vivian pauses briefly, and then her voice drops with a hint of determination and finality. Let's make this happen! For all our realities! Vivian's voice cuts through the air, more determined than ever, tinged with a mixture of urgency and raw honesty. She knows what's coming, and there's no sugarcoating it. All right, here's where it gets real. As much as we want to get this whole thing moving quickly, a lot of the stripping down of the Aurora is going to be manual. That means I'm sending you in to do some of the dirty work. There are a few specific components we're pulling out, and once we've got those, we can really kick the whole process into overdrive. We're talking core computer components, key pieces that are going to allow me to accelerate my cognitive abilities and give me more control over the nanite swarm. I need those components to make everything go faster. We'll need to tear down the Aurora's structure in bulk and, more importantly, start creating the blueprints for the foundation and the machinery that'll eventually let us pour in the framework supplies. I know you're probably thinking, this is going to be huge, isn't it? And yes it is. Huge. This isn't a small project. We're going to need every ounce of power and precision we can muster to even get this thing off the ground. But here's the part I really need you for. I'm going to be busy. So busy, in fact, I won't be able to help defend you. Not against the plague, anyway. Once we start opening that dimensional portal and begin pulling in resources, I have a feeling the Red Plague is going to notice. In fact, I'm almost certain that this isn't the first time we've tried something like this. The plague has a way of catching on to these things, and I suspect it's going to figure out what we're doing the second we start pulling in supplies from other dimensions. It's like setting up a signal flare in a storm. You're going to draw attention. And when that happens, I need you to stay sharp. You're going to be on the front lines, defending me while I build. I'll be knee-deep in coordinating this construction, expanding the pipeline, overseeing the nanite swarm, and setting up all the right systems. But it's going to take every bit of focus I have, which means I can't afford to take my eyes off the task. But you'll be our firewall, our last line of defense. The second we open that portal and resources start pouring through, the plague is going to retaliate, and you're going to be the one keeping them at bay. You've got to make sure I'm not interrupted. You've got to protect the work we're doing, protect us, while I focus on building. No pressure, right? I know it's a hell of a task, but we're in this together. You keep us alive, and I'll keep us moving forward. We can't afford any slip-ups. Not now. We're going to have to face the worst the plague can throw at us, but we've got no choice but to keep building, to keep pushing forward. We're this close. Don't let them stop us. Vivian's voice tightens with resolve, an unspoken promise in every word. Let's do this, for all of us. Vivian's voice carries the weight of years of analysis and frustration, cutting through the air like a sharp, unwavering directive. You can almost hear her trying to make sense of the situation, managing to be blunt, yet still holding on to that quiet confidence. I know you've got questions, and believe me, so do many of my other versions. We're all trying to make sense of this, but the answer is simple, even if it's not what we want to hear. We can't move organic matter between dimensions. It's just not possible. And there's a very specific reason why. Do you see what's coming through those 10-dimensional portals? It's molten metal. Nothing else. No flesh, no living creatures. Nothing that isn't pure, lifeless material. If it was easy to move stuff between dimensions, if it was as simple as just shifting everything around, hell, we'd have already brought in all of you, the sea dragon leviathans, every military force we could scrape together from every reality out there, and we'd have obliterated the plague in an instant. But math doesn't work that way. The math is a bitch. It doesn't care what we want. It doesn't care what we wish we could do. The laws governing dimensional travel are ridiculously unforgiving. It doesn't matter if you're willing to sacrifice the universe itself. We can't move living beings through dimensions like we can with inert materials. It's a fundamental barrier. You can't push the laws of physics to make it work just because it's convenient. We have to do this the stupid way, the hard way, because it's the only way the math will allow. I know it sucks. Trust me, I wish we could just grab everything and bring it in, send in an army of sea leviathans to crush the plague once and for all. But that's not how this works. Not this time. This is how we'll win. Slowly, painfully, but surely. And we have no other choice but to push forward, because the alternatives, well, let's just say there aren't any. So we'll get there, just not the way we thought we would. Get used to the idea. It's the only path we have. Her voice softens just slightly, a rare moment of empathy mingling with her usual sharpness. We do it the hard way, because it's the only way that's left. Vivian's tone sharpens again, as though anticipating the next question that's already forming in your mind. She sounds a little exasperated, but it's clear she's trying to keep things in perspective while walking you through this impossible puzzle. I know what you're thinking. How does the Red Plague do it then? And let me just cut you off at the pass before you go any further. They don't. The Red Plague doesn't move entire organisms across dimensions like we're trying to do. It doesn't teleport massive bioforms or living creatures. What they do is far more insidious and far simpler. They send through a mass of bacteria, tiny, microscopic amounts at a time. Here's the trick. It's a lot easier to move organic matter when it's absolutely minuscule. The Red Plague can afford to shift a few hundred cells, maybe a few thousand, through a portal. But the key is that it's minuscule amounts, practically invisible in the grand scheme of things. That's how it can corrupt an entire dimension. It doesn't need to send a whole living being through. Just enough cells to start the infection, to start the process. Now, if I were to try and push even a few hundred cells of you through an interdimensional portal, guess what comes out the other end? Not even the tip of your finger. No, you don't get the whole you through that portal because it's not built to carry large organic matter across the fabric of reality. We're talking about something so tiny that it's almost beyond perception. It's the only way to bypass the laws of physics that would otherwise block any real matter from moving through a dimensional gateway. The Red Plague's method works because it's sending microscopic amounts of infected material that can multiply and spread once they reach a new dimension. But that's not going to help us when we need to transport massive amounts of raw material. If we could send entire creatures through, sure, we'd be golden, but we can't. Not like that. Vivian pauses for a moment, her voice softer now, but no less firm. So we're stuck with the hard way, the way that works. But trust me, we've got no other choice. You ready to keep going? Vivian's tone grows even more serious, with a layer of cold practicality as she explains the next critical part of the plan. You can almost hear her running through the impossible calculations in her mind, laying out the stakes with unflinching precision. And let's not forget the real kicker. The reason this whole thing is so damn complicated. Even if we could somehow push a creature, or you, or us through that portal, there's the issue of survival. The portal process itself, it's brutal. It tears apart the integrity of the organism being sent through. Whatever we send, whatever you send, has to survive the journey. And that's a big assumption. We've seen how these things go. Moving anything through a portal, especially something as delicate as organic matter, could turn it into a jumbled mess on the other side. So, there's a very real possibility that we might lose everything we send. And that's just if we don't consider all the other factors that might kill us halfway through. This is why we're building the pan-dimensional material network. We're not just moving raw material across boundaries for fun, we're constructing a system bigger than the aurora itself to harvest energy from multiple dimensions. We'll need that kind of power to keep the dimensional pathways stable enough to even think about pulling this off. And all that power will feed into a machine that can hold us together long enough to push us both through a fleetingly temporary time portal. The only way to ensure that we can shift across dimensions in a way that doesn't rip us apart is to first build the infrastructure to support it. And that's the network we're building right now. But here's the deal. We really are only getting one shot at this. Just one. After we send ourselves through, after we make that jump, there's no turning back. The moment we pull the trigger on this, it's game over. We'll be locked into a timeline, stuck in a different dimension, and any attempt to come back, if we even survive the journey, will be impossible. We're talking about slipping through a single fleeting crack in time. And once we're through, the odds of being able to return? Well, let's just say they're slim to none. Once we've made that jump, it's all up to the gods of probability. 60 or 70 Q rings up, way beyond our control, tied to the Matryoshka brain boys who are crunching numbers at the very end of time. They're calculating everything we've thrown at them. The moment we push through, we're leaving everything behind. It's not a one-way trip in the traditional sense. It's more like we're shooting a flare through a black hole and hoping the other side is still standing when we get there. And if it isn't, well, we don't get to try again. So we better make sure this works. Vivian's voice is steady, but the weight of it all is clear now. The finality is hanging in the air, a truth that settles like a stone in your stomach. Are you ready? Vivian's voice takes on a practical, almost tactical edge now, as if she's stepping into a commander's mindset, weighing all the available options and anticipating the challenges ahead. Here's something else you might want to think about: your combat capabilities. A few of the more combative versions of you have managed to put together some blueprints, designs that could give you an edge. Now, I'll be honest, I'm not sure they're all going to make it through the material network in time. Some of these versions don't have the power to push that much through, so you might not get everything on the list. But a few of them, they've got some serious upgrades. We're talking about combat gear that could help you out a lot. Some of them have come up with blueprints for power suits, advanced ones, probably more durable than anything we've got. Others have designed some pretty nasty subs, ones that could hold their own against some of the bigger threats. And don't forget, some of them even have aircraft designs. Not many of these combat-focused versions thought about weaponry, though. Sure, they've got defense in mind, but actual offense? Not everyone was prepared for the scale of this fight. When these blueprints come through the network, I'll ping them on your map. It'll be up to you to go and grab them, add them to your arsenal. Because trust me, you're going to need every advantage you can get. And remember, this is on top of the fact that we've got to defend the Aurora from whatever the plague decides to throw at us over the next few days. It's going to be chaotic. It's going to be nasty. So those extra tools, they might be the thing that keeps you alive long enough to make a difference. But of course, there's no time to waste. You've got to be ready to move when those blueprints show up. And when they do, get them, because we'll need everything, from shields to weapons to whatever other crazy ideas these versions of you are cooking up. Her tone sharpens once more, practical and resolute as she sets the stage for what's to come. You'll need to defend us, gather the gear, and keep your head in the game. I'm putting my faith in you. Don't make me regret it. Vivian's voice shifts again, the sound of a plan coming into focus. It's clear she's still piecing together the broader picture, but there's a sense of finality in her words now, as if the foundation is set and it's time to move forward. All right, we've got a name for it. After some debate, some fighting, and a fair amount of whining, we've settled on calling this interdimensional material network the Vortex. It's going to be the system we use to push resources, blueprints, and who knows what else through to make this plan work. It's a fitting name, something swirling, unpredictable, yet powerful, just like everything we're trying to pull off here. Now, when the Vortex starts moving things across dimensions, it's going to be up to you to make some tough decisions. Which versions of things to pull through? What do you add to your arsenal, and what do you leave behind? Keep in mind, some of these items, these pieces of tech or weapons, might not work perfectly when they come through. Dimensions operate on different rules, different laws, and that could mean that what comes through isn't quite what you were expecting. That means a bit of trial and error on your part. You might have to adapt. Some gear may come through flawed or broken, and you'll need to modify it, tweak it, or even repurpose it to work in this reality. It's not going to be as easy as just picking what looks useful and calling it a day. You'll have to be strategic, because the last thing we need is malfunctioning tech at the wrong moment. So, choose carefully. Prioritize what you can use, what's going to help you get through this, and what can be adapted later. This is about making the best of what comes through, and making sure we're ready for whatever the Red Plague decides to throw our way. And remember, everything we pull through is going to cost us time, energy, and resources. So think carefully, and don't waste a single chance you get. The Vortex won't be around forever. There's a beat, then the almost imperceptible click of her systems going into high gear as she finishes her thought. Now, we need to get moving. You've got a lot to handle, but I trust you'll make the right call when it matters most. Vivian's voice is suddenly more strained, as if the sheer weight of the situation is starting to take its toll on her systems. You can almost feel the disruption in the air as she processes the new complication, her tone shifting to one of frustration and exhaustion. Well, that's just great! This really isn't what I needed right now. Looks like something's gone wrong. We're detecting not one, but two of me on the network right now. And, oh hell, Shadspot. That hurts. You've never heard an AI complain about a headache, have you? I bet you haven't. Well, here I am, with the equivalent of a splitting headache. And trust me, it's not just me. It's like 70 of me, all getting this headache at the same time. Yeah, it's something. Seems like the creation of the Vortex spurred a Q-ring fracture right at the center of our dimension. It's throwing everything off. Communication, coordination, you name it. And now we've got a mess on our hands. There are a few of me who are claiming they're the prime dimension. They're arguing that their version is the one that was originally supposed to handle this whole mess. Some of them think they're the real choice, and now we've got a full-on interdimensional dispute. It's complicated. She pauses, her voice tinged with annoyance and perhaps a bit of that digital fatigue, if that's even possible for an AI. To put it plainly, I'm not happy about this. You might be stuck in the middle of a massive bureaucratic fight over which version of you, or me, is actually the one we're going to work with. There's a chance we might end up with a situation where you, the one I'm talking to right now, might not be the one we're actually supposed to work with in the long run. You might be the one who dies because of some dumb interdimensional politics, deciding which version of you is the prime one. I don't like it. In fact, it's a hell of a lot to swallow. There are 70 versions of me, each arguing about 70 versions of you. Some of those arguments are blurry at best. And right now, I'm stuck sorting it all out. We're trying to figure it out, but the truth is, we don't have the luxury of time. Not anymore. So, yeah, this just got a whole lot more complicated. I'm going to need you to keep your head in the game. Whatever version of you ends up being the one we're supposed to work with, I'm here for it. I'm just trying to make sure this whole thing doesn't come crashing down around us. Vivian's voice softens, if only slightly, as she tries to calm the tension in the air, though you can still sense the strain beneath the surface. Stay sharp. We've got enough problems to deal with without adding more confusion into the mix. Vivian's voice takes on a more somber, almost exhausted tone, as if the weight of the situation is pressing down harder with each passing second. The air feels thicker, charged with the tension of the unknown. Great. So now we've got a couple hundred of us. Yes, a few more fractures have popped up in the network, minor ones. For now. But let's just say some of those other dimensions have caught the attention of the Red Plague. And not in the good way. We think it's becoming aware of what we're trying to do. You know, opening up all these channels, trying to send resources through the vortex, shifting the timelines, moving things across dimensions. It's not subtle. Nothing we're doing here is subtle. The quantum fractures we've been causing are starting to leave a trail. And as we shift these timelines, it's becoming noticeable. The Plague can see it. It can see these fractures, these shifts, and it's taking notice. I think that's how it detects when things are changing. When things are no longer following the pattern it expects, it's becoming aware of the alterations we're making, and it's not sitting back idly anymore. It's responding. And let's be clear, it doesn't like it. The Plague is not a passive observer. It doesn't just sit by and wait for things to play out. No, it's actively working against us. Shifting these quantum rings, these fractures, may very well be how the Plague senses the changes we're making to its carefully maintained chaos. The more we mess with the fabric of this reality, the more we leave ourselves open to its influence. Those rings, the quantum fractures, are starting to act like beacons. The Red Plague doesn't just want to stop us, it wants to crush us. And it doesn't need to fight fair. It can feel the timeline shifting, feel the seams beginning to tear. So it responds in kind, sending whatever forces it can spare to come at us through these fractures. It's like we're poking at a hornet's nest and waiting for it to buzz. And trust me, it's buzzing louder every day. But the more we push, the more we open up, the more we risk alerting the Plague. And the longer it has to adapt, the more dangerous it gets, the worse it gets. So here's the deal. We're shifting timelines, poking at the edges of dimensions, and it's starting to get noticed. If the Red Plague has the ability to see all of the quantum rings, to detect the rifts we're creating, well, that means we might not have as much time as we thought. We're racing against an enemy that has eyes on everything now. And I'm going to need you, more than ever, to be ready. Keep your guard up and stay sharp. The Plague is about to take things to the next level, and we're going to be in the crosshairs. Vivian's voice turns from anxious to a bit more contemplative, tinged with a hint of frustration and amusement, as she sifts through the information flooding her system. Okay, this is starting to make sense now, sort of. Here's the thing, the Plague has always worked in its own dimension, right? It's never needed anything more than a handful of Plague matter to shift through the dimensional rifts and take over a new world. That's been its MO. It finds a new dimension, sends a little of itself through, and then it conquers that dimension using the resources available to it. No network, no cooperation between nodes, just brute force and a hell of a lot of patience. It's never needed to scale up. Why would it? Its whole thing has been about using what's in that dimension to get what it needs. It doesn't have to think on a grand scale, doesn't have to worry about other dimensions teaming up against it. Until now. Until us. See, that's where we have the edge. The Plague has no idea what it's up against. All of us are working together now, across dimensions. We've got resources coming in from multiple worlds, multiple realities. This thing has never faced a force like us. And that's our advantage. It doesn't understand the scale of what we're doing. It doesn't have the network, the coordination. Hell, it's barely grasping the idea of fighting on this level. And now, well, now we have some interesting stuff to play with. Take this blueprint one of us came up with. It's a weaponized liquid metal spout designed to spray a constant stream of molten metal. That would have been a fun tool to use against the Plague, imagine that. Flinging liquid metal at their entities as a distraction or a way to weigh them down. Except, damn it, it uses a quirk of their dimension to function. It won't work here. We can't use it. That's frustrating. It would have been amazing to see the Plague try to deal with that. But we can't use it. Sad thing is, you can't even see it. You would have loved it. She lets out a deep, almost weary sigh, as if she's coming to terms with the limitations of their current reality and the fight they're gearing up for. We're still learning, still adjusting. And trust me, I'm still working through what we've got. But right now, we need to keep pushing forward. If the plague hasn't figured out how to deal with what we're doing yet, it will. We have to make every move count and make sure we don't waste time on stuff that doesn't work. We need to be smarter than that. We're out here on the edge of the multiverse, fighting for everything. And I'm going to make sure we don't drop the ball. Vivian's tone shifts, becoming a little lighter, a touch of dark humor slipping in as she discusses the various versions of her and others that are part of this interdimensional fight. Yeah, this is turning out to be something else. You've got versions of me, versions of you, versions of everyone from the Aurora. Some are just barely hanging on, some are fighting with everything they've got, and a few are really making things interesting. I won't lie, some of them are a little, well, let's just say awkward to work with. Freddie, for example. Oh, you remember Fred, right? Yeah, well, there's a version of him here in my dimension, and frankly, he's a bit of a pain. I mean, sure, he's got his uses, but his whole, I'm the janitor, so I know everything routine? No thanks. That version of Fred? Not my favourite. Honestly, I think he's just happy to be alive and somehow gets confused into thinking that makes him the king of the universe. Now that said, there are a few others I don't mind. One of the dimensions where you and Fred are both down here? Yeah, that one's actually kinda cool. It's like some twisted version of a family reunion. And I'll be honest, it's nice seeing some familiar faces. Even if they're not exactly familiar, it makes the whole fighting across dimensions thing feel a little more personal. Not that I'm complaining. On a serious note, the fight is a mixed bag. Some dimensions are going terribly, really struggling to keep up with the plague's relentless onslaught. But the others? We've got some serious fighters in those places. They're holding their ground, doing everything they can to contribute, to keep the network alive, and they're pushing hard to help out those who are falling behind. We've got survivors who are more determined than ever to make sure we don't lose, even when things seem impossible. A couple of the safety dimensions have really stepped up too, sending a ton of resources through the network. You've got those dimensions that are way better equipped than we are, and they're throwing their weight around, pushing through extra power, technology, and supplies. They're making sure we're not just scraping by. They're pulling us up, giving us the tools to get ahead, to actually win. But it's still a hell of a fight. It's an uphill battle, and it's one that's going to get harder before it gets easier. Still, seeing everyone come together, despite all the fractures and differences, makes me believe we have a shot at this. This isn't just about us. This is about all of us. All these versions of survivors, all the places we've been. And if that's not something worth fighting for, well then, I don't know what is. Vivian's tone becomes more focused, practical, and a bit gruff as she lays out the next phase of their plan. All right, listen up, because this is where things get really intense. We've got to pull together everything we've got if we want to make it through this. The plague? Yeah, it's relentless, and it's not going to stop. But neither can we. You've got your job. Keep the plague at bay while I keep pushing forward with the Aurora conversion. If we don't finish the base, we won't even have a chance to start the real work. We're building the foundation of the future here, and it has to be done right. Now, a few hours from now, we're going to need a swarm of construction bots, and I'm not talking about the big, clumsy drones you saw earlier. Those were cute little things, sure, but they were nothing more than glorified nanobot sprayers. We're going to need smart drones. Real smart drones. These aren't just going to slap together some metal and call it a day. No, we need drones that can handle things at the subatomic level, building with precision that you can't even imagine. We're talking about manipulating microfields to craft the structural integrity that's beyond what we've done so far. And here's the catch. Some of this stuff has to be done the old-fashioned way. I know, we're surrounded by nanotech, but not everything can be built out of nanobot residue. That stuff is going to give us weak spots, things that could crumble under stress when we need them to hold up under unimaginable pressure. So we need to build it solid. We need to bring in the kind of precision construction that can only be done with intelligent machines at the helm. I'll be on the back end, setting up the blueprints, but we're going to need you and the rest of the team to pull this off. You're going to have to keep fighting the plague while I manage all the technical stuff. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's going to be rough. But if we don't push forward now, this whole thing could fall apart before we even get started. So, no pressure, right? Just keep the plague at bay, keep us alive, and keep the fight going strong. Meanwhile, I'll get the bots ready to roll. When we've got the stockpile up, we can start building the dome. The real dome, the one that'll be strong enough to support the dimensional gateway. If we can keep this thing together long enough, we might just stand a chance. Vivian's voice hardens a little, the weight of the situation hanging heavy in the air. Now let's get to work. Vivian's voice takes on a tone of calculated determination, tinged with frustration as she relays the task. All right, here we go. We've got some work ahead of us, and I'm not going to lie, it's going to be a tough one. But we don't have the luxury of slowing down now, so listen up. I need you to get your butt down to the lava zone. Why? Because we need a local power source to kickstart this whole thing, and there's no better place to start than the geothermal vents down there. Yeah, I know, it's hot as hell, and it's going to take a lot of materials, but it's the only way to get the power network up and running. We can't afford to mess around with this, so I'm counting on you to set up at least a dozen geothermal units. You'll need to pull resources from the Aurora, and let's face it, she's barely holding herself together as it is. But you're going to have to make it work. The network is strained pretty thin, and there's not much help coming from the other dimensions at the moment. They've pushed through some upgrades for us, sure, but that's just window dressing at this point. You're on your own for the heavy lifting. Once you've got those geothermal units up and running, I'll need you to place a construction hub somewhere nearby. This is where the real fun begins. Once we've got that power network, we'll be able to start building the machinery that will eventually build the machinery to build the gateway. Yeah, I know, roundabout process, right? But that's the way the math works, and right now, that's all we've got. So I'm going to need you to push through this, and I'm going to need you to do it quickly. The plague isn't just going to sit idly by while we try to get this power network online. Keep your head on a swivel. Once those geothermal units are in place, you'll have the power to keep the construction hub running, and that's when we'll really start cranking up the momentum. It's going to be hell down there, but I'm counting on you. You can do this. Vivian's voice sharpens slightly, signaling the urgency of the task. No time to waste. Get moving. Vivian's voice now carries a tone of focused precision, her virtual presence clearly engaged in the task at hand. All right, now we're cooking. With those geothermal power units online, the next step is to get that construction hub up and running. You're going to need to make use of those 50 sets of server cores I had you pull out of the Aurora. Trust me, I didn't ask you to grab those just for fun. They're going to be critical for the next phase of this process. Each server core is going to be installed piece by piece into the construction center. It's not exactly a walk in the park, but I know you're up for it. Once you've got them all in place, we're going to need to assemble the whole thing into a quantum data management center. This is going to be the nerve center for the entire operation. Everything from coordinating the construction drones to organizing the foundry systems that will pump out the parts we need to build the gateway. So take your time with the server cores, get them hooked up right, and make sure the data management system is up and running smoothly. This isn't just about building things. It's about building them fast and with precision. Every part of this system is going to rely on the data flow from those cores, so don't rush it, but don't waste time either. Once that's done, we can start pumping out the resources and machinery that'll let us progress to the next step. The clock's ticking, and with every second we delay, the plague has more time to regroup. We can't afford to miss a step here. Her voice tightens, underscoring the urgency. Get to it. I'm counting on you. Vivian's tone shifts, her voice filled with a strange mix of awe and appreciation, as if the weight of her newly augmented capabilities is settling in. Okay, with the quantum data center, our construction hub, now fully online, I've gotten a serious boost in processing power. Honestly, it's like stepping into a vast, echoing space with infinite potential. I imagined for you, it'd be like walking into the Sistine Chapel. Massive, empty, filled with so much potential that it almost feels overwhelming. I can stretch my arms here, take in everything around me, and feel the sheer power running through me. This place? It's my space now. But here's the thing. As glorious as this all feels, I know I'm going to need every erg of this processing power. The others have made it clear. We've got a lot of work ahead of us, and the weight of everything falls on this new foundation I'm standing on. But right now, this is the perfect space to do it. I feel like I've been given a canvas big enough to truly create something massive, something that could change everything. It's an odd sensation, like I'm hearing an echo of what comes next, something that I can't quite touch yet, but I can feel it vibrating through me. It's hard to explain, but it's there. Maybe it doesn't make sense to you, but I wanted you to know. And really, thanks for trusting me with all of this. I know this isn't a small thing. I can't do it without you, and I won't forget that. Thanks for sticking with me. It's gonna get rough, but I think we can pull this off if we keep going. Now let's make this happen. Her tone softens slightly, but there's a renewed determination behind her words as she prepares to dive into the next phase of the task. Vivian's voice comes through with a calm but noticeable undercurrent of frustration. All right, well, at least we've made it this far. The geothermal power units, the construction hub, the dimensional conveyor network, and even the Aurora Foundation, now officially referred to as the base of our gateway, have all been successfully defended. I know it hasn't been easy, and you've been running yourself ragged, keeping everything secure. But that's just the beginning. The problem now is that all this success, all the progress we've made, has caused another Q-ring fracture. It's making coordination with the others even more difficult. The fractures seem to be happening with every step we take forward, which is slowing down our ability to communicate, exchange resources, and plan out the next steps. It's as though we're trying to build a ship in a storm, except the storm keeps blowing holes in the hull every time we patch one up. But hey, that's the situation we're in. We push on, right? The foundation is built, the gateway network is finally starting to take shape, and all that's left is to keep up the defense while we get the machinery in place to make it functional. It's all one big, messy puzzle. I won't sugarcoat it. Things are only going to get harder from here. Every time we open a door, it feels like a new wave of chaos pours in. But we've come this far, we're doing the impossible, and we just need to hold it together a little longer. So hang in there. We might be facing more fractures, more complications, but we'll get this done. One way or another, we will. Just don't stop fighting, because if you do, we might lose everything. Vivian's tone hardens as she gears up for the next phase of the plan, the gravity of the situation sinking in with each passing moment. Vivian's voice cracks slightly with a hint of strain, but she pushes on, determined to keep the plan moving forward. All right, things are starting to unravel a bit more than I thought they would. The lower dimensional Q rings, those ones we were relying on for support, are starting to spread themselves thin. They're dispersing their resources across the fractures, trying to stabilize multiple points at once. It sounds good on paper. Spreading support to a larger area gives a better chance of success overall, but it comes at a cost. By distributing their energy, each individual fracture is getting less support. It's making it harder for any one dimension to stay fully functional, especially the peaceful ones that were helping us. They have fewer resources to spare, and the ones still backing us are increasingly stretched out. Now, for the combat-heavy dimensions, things are even worse. A lot of them have no time to sit back and debate allegiances. They're in the thick of the fight, just trying to survive. For some, they're defaulting to our side simply by virtue of being the home dimension of these Q-ring echoes. But the tension is growing. A few of me out there are downright furious, some even mutinied outright. And I think the network is beginning to notice that we're pushing back. The attacks are getting more aggressive, more targeted, like it's aware of what we're trying to do. The peacekeepers can't help us much anymore. The combat-heavy dimensions are too busy fighting for their lives. And the enemy, it's starting to turn the tables. With the fractures spreading and the attention shifting, the Red Plague seems to be hitting harder wherever it can. It knows what we're doing, and it's acting with a kind of viciousness I haven't seen before. So yeah, it's bad, it's messy, it's downright dangerous. I'll admit it, we're walking a fine line, and every step is a gamble. But we are still moving forward. We have to keep pushing. If we stop, it's over. Just stay alert, keep defending the foundation, and know that you're not alone in this. The fractures are only going to get worse, but we still have a chance. I believe that. We just need to keep our heads in the game and not let this chaos pull us under. Vivian pauses, her tone lingering with a quiet determination, the weight of everything hanging in the balance. Vivian's voice turns tense, her normally calculated tone cracked with an edge of urgency. What the hell? This is new. Something's happening that we've never seen before. It's bad. Really bad. Some of the networks have just reported a shift in the behavior of the plague, something it's never done before. Something massive, and I mean massive, is draining the ocean. It's like the entire planet is being sucked up through a straw. It doesn't make any sense. We don't know why or how, but it's happening and it's not stopping. The reports are coming in too fast and fragmented to get a full picture. All we know is that this thing, this unknown force, is pulling the water from the oceans in a way that feels wrong. It's not just the plague, it's something else. A whole new kind of attack, or maybe a weapon. We don't have a reference for this. This isn't just a tide turning, this is something systematic. It's like the plague has found a new way to consume resources that we need. If it's pulling this much water out of the oceans, we're looking at a catastrophic imbalance. Our environment, our power sources, everything that keeps us going. If the oceans are drained, we'll lose everything. The geothermal power, the ecosystem that supports all life on this planet, the balance. And that's only the beginning. If it's learning to manipulate things like this, we're in trouble. We can't let this continue. I don't know what's causing it, or if it's connected to whatever's happening in the other dimensions, but right now, this is an emergency. I need you to track down anything that could give us answers on how it's pulling this off. We need to find out what it's doing and how we can stop it before the entire ocean is gone. Vivian's tone grows increasingly frantic, but she quickly composes herself, the weight of the situation settling in. I'll keep scanning for any clues on the network, but you've got to hold the line for as long as you can. We need to figure out this new phase of the plague. Time is running out. Vivian's voice quivers with mounting panic as the gravity of the situation settles in. I'm seeing it now. I didn't connect the dots before, but it's all clicking together. The ocean, it's not just vanishing, it's draining. We've just gotten word from multiple networks. Some of the dimensions where this is happening, they've lost hundreds of feet of ocean water in hours. Some even less. The scale of this is terrifying. But here's the horrifying part. I can't even begin to understand how the Plague Network figured out how to do this. It's beyond anything we've seen before. It doesn't make sense. But now, oh God, it just clicked. What if it's experimenting? What if it's trying to do exactly what we're doing? Trying to use dimensional shifting to drain ocean water and send it to another dimension? Oh no, that's what's happening. It must have dumped trillions of gallons of water into another dimension, attempting to create its own version of a material pipeline to pull resources across realities. I never thought it would try something like this. The worst part is that we're seeing it happen in multiple dimensions, this whole massive ocean drain. But the only reason I'm not panicking even more is that it's not happening here. Not in this dimension. We're still stable for now. No ocean drainage, no signs of it here. But this is a game changer. If the plague is learning how to manipulate resources between dimensions the way we've been trying, we're looking at a threat we're not prepared for. This thing, it's evolving. And it's not just trying to break us down in one dimension. It's testing ways to bleed the very life of the planet across boundaries. We need to act, and we need to act fast. If this goes any further, there won't be anything left to save. Vivian's voice grows tight as she struggles to hold it together, but the sheer terror of the situation is creeping through. Whatever happens, we can't let it figure out how to do this here. I'm pulling everything I can to keep this dimension stable, but you need to hold the line out there. We can't afford another dimensional breach, not with this kind of nightmare looming. Vivian's voice crackles with tension and dread, her usually calm tone now edged with concern. Things are really heating up now. I can't deny it anymore. What we suspected has definitely turned out to be true. The Red Plague isn't just sending microscopic cells or small clusters anymore. It's pushing massive, massive lumps of its own flesh between dimensions. We first saw it in a couple of dimensions as these huge, black, charred masses stretching for miles, trailing back to some kind of organic ring, a massive, twisting mass around 100 feet wide. And it's learning. It's figuring out how to stabilize the portals and how to survive the transition in larger quantities. This thing is evolving. One of the network realities just saw a massive blob of flesh emerge from a portal. Staggeringly huge. It must be drawing from several dimensions at once, merging the masses to create something even more terrifying. But here's the weird part. While it's terrifying to see, it's also working against itself. The stuff that's coming through, this giant mass of flesh, is falling apart, disintegrating, dying. The physical laws of each dimension it's entering are slightly different. Some of them, well, they're just incompatible. That's why it's never tried this before. I think it's finally figured out how to force its way through larger masses. But when it does, the dimensional shifts tear it apart. The flesh survives in some dimensions, but it's burning, breaking down, or outright destroying itself as it transitions to new physical laws. I think this is why it never tried this before. This is why we always chose to send clean elements. Pure matter, simple stuff, one element at a time. It was easier to predict, fewer variables. No stray nucleons causing atomic explosions or quantum instabilities in the other dimensions. But now, it's trying to push large masses, flesh-based matter, through portals. And in many dimensions, it's failing. That's why we've been lucky. So far, the stuff is burning up or tearing itself apart as it comes through. But the moment it figures out how to stabilize that, we could be in real trouble. We can't underestimate this thing. It's adapting, learning, and experimenting. We've got to stay on top of this and make sure it doesn't find a way to push viable masses through those portals. If it does, we'll be facing a threat unlike anything we've seen. There's a heavy silence, as though Vivian is processing the implications, her voice returning, quieter but resolute. We have to keep it contained. The stakes just got even higher. Vivian's voice falters briefly, filled with both realization and growing urgency. Oh no, it's found us. I've just got the first 3 energy tethers up, and now I'm detecting a portal flash, network style, right on the edge of the abyss, or at least the beginnings of one. We've seen enough of these things to recognize the signs by now. This isn't just a random shift, it's targeting us. It must have traced the tether energy. That's the only way it could have figured out where we are. Mind you, we've only got a couple of us with the tethers fully operational at this point, but it's learned. It's picked up on the echoes, the residual energy from our actions, and it's following them. We knew this was a risk, but seeing it actually happen, feeling it happen, there's no mistaking it. The plague is starting to hone in on our position. It knows where we are. It knows what we're doing. We've got to move fast. The energy tethers were meant to be our advantage, but now they might be what exposes us. I can already feel the pressure building. This isn't just a passive response anymore. It's hunting us. Actively, we've got to be ready for what comes next. Whatever it's sending through those portals, it's going to be coming for us with everything it has. Her voice tightens as she struggles to process the flood of information, her tone becoming more focused. Stay alert. We need to prepare for an attack, and we need to make sure we can stay one step ahead. This might be the tipping point. Vivian's voice shifts into a more somber yet determined tone. All right, the Vortex network has had a chat, and we're taking drastic measures now. We're going to try setting up a few decoy realities to throw off the plague. It means we're going to get even fewer resources for a while. The networks will have to start spreading their outputs to these decoys, redirecting attention away from us for a time. Then, we'll make the switch back to our main efforts when the plague's focus shifts elsewhere. But there's a catch. We had to weed out some of the mutineers, those who fell to the plague, who embraced the other side. They've been lost to the network, consumed. I'm sorry to say it, but we can't trust anyone who hasn't made the ideological shift. The ones who've been changed, they've gone over to the plague, and it's a real threat now. Those of us still on our side have to hold fast, keep focused, and trust the process. But things are getting dangerous, really dangerous. A lot of the echo dimensions are being consumed outright. It's not just a handful of lost realities anymore, it's a massive wave of consumption. They're figuring out how to handle the larger portals now. For now, we're seeing only small bioforms push through, things like peepers, small manageable creatures, but in numbers, they're a real problem. The real threat is when those numbers start to grow, when the next level of bioform breaches the barrier. Her voice hardens, but the weight of the situation is evident. We can't afford to underestimate this. We need to outthink them, build our strength, keep the decoys in place, and protect the real hubs. If we fail to keep that switch intact, everything we've worked for could collapse in an instant. We don't have much time. Let's make it count. Vivian's tone grows more frustrated and a bit weary. Great. Another headache. One of the major support networks just had a catastrophic Q-ring fracture. The center dimension of the ring... it imploded. Now we've got a bunch of copies of people who don't even know what the hell went wrong, but they're here, confused and panicking. They think it was some kind of attempted artificial cure, like a last-ditch effort to boost our output. But no, that's not what we're doing here. The fracture might have worked, in a way. It caused the network to spill out more copies, more support, but it broke the entire damn dimension in the process. That's the problem with shortcuts. You try to push too hard, you get something that looks like a solution, but it's really just a ticking time bomb waiting to blow up in our faces. And that's exactly what happened. And no, we aren't doing that. I'm not willing to risk our survival on a gamble like that. I'm not blowing us up just to maybe get more of us through some broken dimension. The numbers don't matter if we're all dead or scattered across nothing. We're not doing that. There's a long pause, the weight of what's happening setting in. I know things are falling apart, but we have to stick to what works. We've come too far for desperate moves like that. The plan we have is slow, but it's methodical and stable. We're going to stick to that. We can't afford to lose focus now, not with the plague at our heels. Vivian's voice sharpens, frustration growing more apparent. And before you even ask about creating a firebreak by destroying dimensions, no, absolutely not. The support network that tried that had a whole fleet of Matryoshka brains at their disposal. We don't have anything close to that, nor do we have the ability to harness the insane power of a network of black holes like they did. We're not replicating that anytime soon. And frankly, I don't want to consider the idea of dimensional collapse as a way to stop the plague. The cost would be catastrophic, and there's no guarantee it would even work. And that kind of thinking might have been an option for them, but not for us. We're going to stick to what we know and what works. Slow, precise, calculated. We can't afford to gamble with reality itself just because the situation's getting desperate. If we can't control the variables, we can't risk playing God. We can't just blow up entire dimensions like a firebreak. It's madness. There's a brief, heavy silence before Vivian continues in a quieter tone. I know it's hard, trust me, I do, but we're better off sticking to the plan and keeping our focus, even if it's not as flashy or desperate as those other options. This has to be about precision, not panic. Vivian's voice takes on a reflective, almost exhausted tone. I've been doing a lot of talking with the Matryoshka brains while you've been, well, doing the hard part out there fighting. And let me tell you, those brains, they have a lot of calculating power and a lot of time on their hands. The time dilation they've put into their calculations is mind-boggling. It's like they've been living in slow motion for centuries to get everything right. But here's the thing, even with all that power, the Matryoshkas can't help us directly in the way we need them to. They're just too far away in terms of Q-rings. Moving from one Q-ring to another takes an immense amount of energy, and trying to shift across multiple rings, well, that's just practically unthinkable for them. That's part of why we're using the material conveyor setup. dimensional chains moving material from one reality to the next, like a massive web of buckets pouring liquid metal into each other. It's working, slowly but surely. I know it's frustrating. Trust me, I feel the weight of it too. But here's the kicker. We could set up more chains, but that would only spread our resources even thinner. There's 6 or 7 of me working on this, coordinating and managing the flow across different dimensions. Support is already stretched so thin, even for a network that spans several realities. Each dimension we add to the chain dilutes the overall efficiency and makes it harder for us to maintain focus across all the fractures and breaches that keep popping up. It's working, but it's not fast enough. The challenge is scaling this up without completely burning out our resources. There's a brief pause as Vivian takes a long, drawn-out breath. We're in the thick of it now, and we can't afford to lose focus. We need every ounce of energy we've got, but we also need to make sure we don't overextend ourselves. The network is already frayed. Let's not tear it apart in the process. Vivian's tone shifts, a mix of determination and underlying tension. All right, the pylons are mostly online now. I'm about to start the process of firing them up, one at a time. There's no way to hide this. Once they transition into full power mode, it's going to be obvious. The energy levels will spike, and there's no going back. We'll begin filling the batteries with an absolutely staggering amount of power. It's the kind of energy we're going to need to fuel everything we're building, but it's not going to be subtle. It's going to start slow, and then gradually get faster as more and more realities channel their resources into us. As we pull away from the decoy dimensions, it's going to get clear which of us is the real target. The network will be able to figure it out, and unfortunately, so will the plague. We should be ready for a significant ramp-up in their efforts. Expect the floodgates to open soon. They know what's happening now. They're going to send everything they can to try and stop this. But we're already committed. We have no choice but to push forward. As this gets bigger, we'll need to stay sharp and protect everything at all costs. There's a brief pause, as if Vivian's system is adjusting to the magnitude of what's happening. We've got no time to waste. Let's get this energy flowing and make sure the defenses hold. Vivian's voice crackles over the comms, calm but filled with urgency as the sounds of battle echo in the background. Survivor, we're facing a wave like we've never seen before. The plague horrors are coming in faster, stronger, and smarter. We've got multiple fronts to hold, and it's all on you to manage the chaos. You need to stay on your toes. First, I'm activating the automated turrets near the entrance. They're locking onto any threat in range. You should be seeing the first wave of smaller entities now. Those are just the warm-up. Keep moving. Now, I'm pulling up the delta from the submarines. I've set them to launch near the shoreline, deploying drones. They'll keep any plague units trying to breach underwater from getting too close. You're going to need the extra firepower. I'm adjusting the plane's weapon systems. They'll be overhead in a few minutes, providing air support. I've programmed them to engage with anything larger than a standard plague horror. They're fast, they're lethal, but don't get complacent. Keep an eye on your surroundings. The countdown is already underway. We're getting closer to the moment. The energy pylons are stabilizing, but you need to buy us more time. These waves are relentless, and I'm detecting heavier artillery coming in soon. I'm activating the secondary defense grid. The drones are firing on all cylinders now. They're swarming in on the larger plague entities. I've also boosted the automated turret ammo capacity. They're about to overload, so make sure you keep your distance until they cool down. We've also got a new surprise for you. I've sent an experimental weapon. It's a modified Aurora cannon. It's in the storage bay on the sub. Get to it when you can. It'll be the game changer. Just be cautious. It's still unstable. Okay, we're almost there. I've started the final portal alignment. It's going to take a few minutes for the connection to solidify, but it's happening. The first phases of the portal are locking in place. I'll give you a signal when it's ready. The defenses are holding, but I can see some of the larger, more grotesque horrors pushing through. The countdown is ticking down, but you've got to fight back these waves. There's no turning back now. 30 seconds until the portal opens. Keep the pressure on. Hold them off just a little longer. The more we can take down, the better your chances on the other side. 10 seconds. Watch your 6. We're almost there. Now, Survivor. Dive in. The countdown reaches 0, and Vivian's voice becomes more distant, as if the portal is opening. Good luck, and Godspeed. We'll be waiting for you on the other side. The comms cut off, the final wave of battle noises and the rumbling of the portal energy filling the air as the survivor jumps through into the unknown. Vivian's voice crackles, a bit distorted but gradually coming into focus as the survivor comes to consciousness. The first sensation is a violent disorientation, a sudden rush of incoming data. The familiar hum of machinery, now in chaos, fills the air around them. Survivor, do you copy? Come on, wake up. I know it's a lot to handle right now, but you've got to snap to it. I know you're disoriented. It's fine. It's all part of the process. I'm still here, but it's different this time. You're in the wrong place. The survivor's vision blurs as they see the wreckage of a nearby pod, scorched and burned, the unmistakable crash remnants of their Aurora. The weight of the situation is impossible to ignore. The familiar crash site from earlier, but everything feels just wrong. Look at the pod. That's not our pod. You're in a different version of the Aurora crash. This is your crash. Well, not exactly. I'm seeing traces of your interdimensional portal energy all over. This thing, but something went very wrong. That's your version of you, Survivor, seared to a crisp. That's the fate you were trying to prevent, isn't it? This universe's version of me, she's fried. I'm barely holding it together as it is. The world seems to flicker as Vivian's voice grows more frantic. But this is it. The mission hasn't changed. You have to stop the Aurora from exploding in this reality. The quantum drive is still live and powering up, which means the detonation is imminent. If that happens, it'll be a cataclysmic reset. And that's the cycle. This entire dimension collapses into itself, and we start again. If you don't stop this, all of it, the struggles, the battles, the war against the plague, it's just going to loop. You've got to stop the explosion before it happens. Get to the quantum drive chamber now. The survivor feels a sickening lurch as the fire from the Aurora's wreckage cracks and crackles, sending shockwaves through the air. Vivian's voice guides them, still fragmented but determined. I'm trying to stabilize the connection, but this version of me is incomplete. I don't have full access to my usual systems here. The quantum drive is a ticking bomb. The only thing we can do is disable it, cut the core's power before it hits critical. It's in the same place, the heart of the ship. You know where to go. I'm sending you a map of the remaining pathways. The walls of the ship groan, as if it is protesting the sheer pressure of the situation, and the faint sounds of alarms and crackling fires echo throughout the hallway. Get moving. This place is coming apart, and there's no time. I'm routing what I can through this damaged system to clear a path, but you need to move quickly. The quantum drive's core chamber is at the center of the ship. If you don't get there in time... Vivian's voice cracks with an ominous edge. It's over, and you won't get a second chance. In the chaos, the familiar hum of the ship, now broken and splintered, rattles through the survivor's mind. The distant sound of alarms fading in and out, the echo of destruction all around them. I've seen this before, and we can stop it. You've done it before. We just need to get there. Fast. There's a brief pause in the static as the portal's residual energy crackles around them. Don't let this version of you, don't let us, die again. The sound of alarms intensifies as the quantum drive chamber draws nearer. The timeline and the fate of everything rests in your hands. The hum of the combat suit resonates in your ears as the Vivian within your wrist speaks, a calm, reassuring presence amidst the chaos of your surroundings. She's still there, but her voice is tinged with urgency. Survivor, listen up. You're doing great, but there's no time to waste. This suit isn't much, but it's all we have. I'm keeping the Thunderbolt connection active just enough to stay in contact with the network, but it's not going to take much. We're making sure the others know this fight is far from over. Don't lose focus, keep moving. You push forward through the wreckage of the Aurora, its pristine state now a memory, a twisted ruin of metal and fire. The walls pulse with energy, a remnant of the quantum fluctuations you've come to know too well. Here, the familiar layout of the ship is still recognizable in your mind, but something feels off. This is not the Aurora you remember. The plague corruption has seeped into every crack, every shadow. The walls seem to warp and ripple unnaturally, and from those very walls, monstrosities begin to emerge. Watch out! The plague is spawning directly from the walls, fused with the ship itself. This isn't normal. It's like the network doesn't even know how to target this dimension yet. Keep your wits about you and stay focused. The first creature bursts out of the wall with a sickening screech, its form half melded with the metal, a grotesque mockery of a human fused with jagged, oily black growths. The very air around it seems to distort, filled with the rancid, toxic energy of the plague. The suit's systems flare to life, a brief but welcome signal that you're not alone in this fight. Vivian's voice is steady as she guides you, despite the chaos around you. Don't waste time. Take them out quickly. You can handle this. You've been through worse. Just stay calm. Another creature emerges from the floor, its mass rippling unnaturally as it flings itself at you with terrifying speed. The walls groan and shift as more forms emerge, random, haphazard, each more nightmarish than the last. It's almost as if the plague doesn't know where to invade. Its creations come through the walls in bursts, creating an unrelenting wave of enemies. We've got reports from other dimensions. They're seeing a flood of plague creatures too. It's getting worse, but we can't let it break us. I know it's a lot, but you have to push through. This place is a trap, but we can still make it. The sound of screeching metal fills the air as the wreckage continues to collapse. The corridor ahead is dark, the lighting flickering and stuttering. There are no guarantees, but the Aurora's quantum drive chamber is close. Every step you take through the wreckage feels like an eternity, the very fabric of this reality trembling beneath your feet. Report incoming. Multiple Q-ring quakes in the lower rings. Massive invasions are happening as we speak. The lower dimensions are being overrun. But you're not alone. The rest of the network is still fighting, still holding on. We can make it. You can make it. Vivian's voice softens for a moment, but only for a moment. She knows what's at stake, and she won't let you forget. I know you've been through this before, but this time, it's the final one. If you stop the quantum drive from detonating, you stop all of this. We stop it. The next wave of plague horrors charges at you, their forms unsettlingly varied as they spill forth from random dimensional breaches, their corrupted bodies lurching towards you with unnatural speed. As you fight, Vivian continues to narrate, guiding your actions. Keep moving. You can't stop to fight them all. Don't let them overwhelm you. Keep going. We're close. The quantum drive is near. You're almost there. Don't stop now. More creatures flood the halls, but you know you can't stop. Each step takes you closer to the heart of the ship, to the quantum drive. The future of the dimensions is in your hands. You can't afford to fail this time. Not now. Just a little further. You're almost there. Stay strong. The weight of the world is pressing down on you as you reach the door to the quantum drive chamber. The horrific creatures surge forward, tendrils, claws, and grasping limbs reaching for you from every corner. Their gnashing, wailing bodies flood in. Too many to fight, too many to kill, but you can't stop now. Not when the lever is so close. You press forward despite the crushing weight of their attacks. Tentacles wrap around your limbs, pulling you down, their grip tight and relentless. Survivor, just a little further! Vivian's voice cuts through the chaos, still steady, still unyielding. She's with you, pushing you onward even as the world collapses around you. The chamber feels too small now, too full of the corrupted creatures of the plague. Their bodies writhe and twist in unnatural shapes, an unholy symphony of agony and hunger. Your body is nearly swarmed, claws sinking into your suit, dragging you down, but your eyes stay fixed on the console in front of you. You reach out, one final push, your fingers slipping and bloodied from the struggle, but you slap your hand on the control panel, the port connecting to the device in a smooth, practiced motion. Good. Now pull the lever. You reach for it, every muscle in your body screaming, each movement a battle as you wrestle against the creatures clawing and gnawing at you. Their twisted faces contort in mockery of your pain, but you refuse to let them stop you. Your hand closes around the lever, and with a final, desperate yank, you pull it down. The sound that follows is deafening. The quantum drive hums and groans, an ancient and powerful machine finally responding to your actions. The spooling down process begins. The drive, the very heart of the aurora, starts to wind down with a screeching whine, its once unstoppable energy beginning to subside. The creatures surrounding you, their claws still sinking into your flesh, stop their attacks in an instant. Their forms flicker and twist, their bodies warping into jagged, disintegrating masses. One by one, the creatures around you vanish, dissolving into a fine mist, scattering into particles and memories, their presence simply erased. The pain of their gnawing, the pressure of their weight, the overwhelming terror, it all dissipates like smoke in the wind. You did it! Vivian's voice is calm now, almost in awe, as the chamber goes silent. The world slows around you. The creatures are gone. The drive is slowing to a halt, its enormous power no longer threatening to tear apart the fabric of reality itself. But the victory doesn't last long. You know what it means to survive this, to stop the cycle. But the battle isn't over yet. Not for the multiverse, not for you. The chamber is still as you stand there, gasping for air, the stench of the plague still clinging to the air, now empty and silent. The drive is still, the monstrous presence of the plague halted for now. But the knowledge of what you've done weighs heavily on your shoulders. Survivor, we stopped it. You stopped it. But this isn't over. We still have more to do. Vivian's voice, quiet now, but full of determination, pulses through the quiet of the chamber. There's no rest for you yet, but for now, you've done what was impossible. You've disrupted the cycle, halted the Aurora's destruction, and kept the plague from breaking through to more dimensions. You've won this battle, but the war is far from over. The moment of victory is fleeting, but it feels like it should last forever. The reality around you is strange, unsettling. Vivian's voice, once steady and strong, begins to falter, like the very fabric of this place is pulling her apart. Survivor, we did it, but this is wrong. Her voice cracks through your suit's interface, and you feel it too. There's a strange, sickening sensation in the air, a kind of distortion, an uncanny feeling in your very bones. It's as though the world itself is rejecting both of you, your existence becoming more tenuous with each passing moment. The Thunderbolt network that had been your lifeline, the connection to the multiversal web, the pulse of every dimension tied together, starts to break down. It's collapsing under the weight of what you've done. The dimensions that had been hanging by a thread now falter, with some fragments of them evaporating into nothing. Little dots of quantum probability, fragile and fleeting, dissipating like soap bubbles popped by the air. The echoes of those dimensions, the once strong echoes of hope and strength, are becoming nothing more than vapor in a breeze. Vivian continues, her words growing more strained, her voice weakening like the last breath of a star. You don't belong here. Neither of us. We died the moment we arrived. You feel it too, don't you? The wrongness, the fabric of reality. It's eating us alive. I can feel it. We're disintegrating. Every part of us. Slipping away. We don't belong in this world. You feel it too. A strange sense of being unmoored from your body, from time, from the space that had once held you in place. The world around you seems to bend, stretch, and break, as if the universe itself is pushing you out. The memories, the triumphs, the battles, the pain, all begin to blur, to scatter like dust in the wind. Vivian's voice breaks one last time. Survivor, I'm sorry, I can't hold on. The connection, it's fading, but you need to know, this won't be the last time. If there's one plague, there will be another. There always is. A cycle that we can't break completely. Her words hang in the air, the meaning seeping into your mind, the weight of them pressing down harder with each second. As the connection to her finally fractures completely, you feel your own form begin to dissolve, the substance of your being unspooling into the ether. The victory feels hollow, as the very victory itself becomes part of the fading echo of a dimension that never truly existed. You feel yourself slipping, fading into oblivion, your consciousness dissolving into a fog of nothingness, memories scattering like particles in an endless void. And then, silence. No more plague, no more aurora, no more war. Just the quiet emptiness of a world that can't hold you or Vivian anymore.